Hey guys, it's Miss McLean. I know y'all are all devastated that I'm not there with you today. Um, I can feel your sadness, and I think it's so sweet that y'all are so upset that I'm not there today, and that y'all are stuck with Mr. McCool and you know watching me on TV. So today I wanted to make sure that even though I wasn't there because I've been out so much with training, that we were still able to keep going and keep moving forward because there's some stuff that we need to get to, the more fun stuff. So I wanted to keep moving forward so that we could get to the fun stuff. Today we're going to be talking about cultural diversity, which is something I'm sure that y'all have all talked about before, but it's a little bit different when it comes to healthcare and just the variety of people that you see and deal with each day. Um, in Canvas, I have uploaded the cultural diversity PowerPoint to Unit 3, and it's going to be, let's see, Chapter 9 in your book that we're going to be going through and talking through today. Um, I'm recording from my wonderful, beautiful home on Sunday afternoon. If you hear a loud noise or a yell, the Falcons are playing. It's Justin's favorite team, so I apologize in advance. I have the door closed. You may also see my sweet baby Jules walk around. She's in here in the room with me as I record, so we'll see. Maybe she'll make an appearance later on. She's kind of cute. Y'all know that already, though. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be looking at, again, Chapter 9, PowerPoint and Canvas, if you want to go ahead and pull it up. This will also be available for your listening pleasure on YouTube. I'll copy the link in Canvas for y'all if when you study you want to go back and re-listen to it. I'm sure that's going to happen. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking about cultural diversity. And it's important to note, I'm going to try to use my iPad to kind of show y'all what slide I'm talking about. Maybe, there we go. That culture, ethnicity, and race is something that healthcare workers have to deal with and care for in a multitude of different ways, a multitude of different cultures that we see when we're in the hospital. We have to respect that culture, even though it's not like our own and we don't necessarily understand it. And we have to treat the people with respect. We still have to make sure they understand the importance of the care that we're providing and the magnitude of the decisions that they're making. We have to be aware that each person is unique and that we do have culture stereotypes that we all have, and we'll all talk about some of mine. And we also have to understand how that culture influences how they make decisions and how they make healthcare decisions. Let's see if I can get this to work. Up, 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 up. So now we're going to be talking about health disparities. Health disparities is something that you really need to be paying attention to and be keeping in the back of your mind as you move through all of your education. Health disparities are huge, specifically in Mississippi. And Healthy People 2020 defines health disparity as a particular type of health difference that is closely linked with social, economic, and/or environmental disadvantages. So let's see what period is watching this, what block, 5 and 6. Let me pick on my go-to. We'll pick on Reed. Bless his heart, the only guy in the class. Reed, what is an area that you know in the state of Mississippi that has health disparities or a group of people that are at a disadvantage because of where they live? Okay, and if it's not 5 and 6, we'll pick on Darius because he's also my go-to guy all the time. So, what group of people in Mississippi in a particular location just north of us that we talk about all the time that has lack of resources because of their location? It's a large farming community, an area. Okay, so I'm really going to hope that you say the Delta because the Delta has lots of health disparities based off of their social, economic, and environmental disadvantages. Okay, so that's an example of a disparity. Also, we could think about undocumented immigrants or workers. They are at a disadvantage when it comes to health care. They typically don't set up, they don't have a primary care provider, they don't have a person that they maintain wellness with. They're at a disadvantage because they're undocumented. Um, let's see, let me see what else I want to tell y'all. Okay, and then another thing we want to talk about is social determinants of health. Um, let's see, Zoe and Olivia. What are some social determinants of health? We've talked about resources and what are some things that either allow you lots of resources or keep you from resources as far as healthcare? Okay, I'm going to hope that you said your economic status, where you live, where you work, your age. It's all shaped by the distribution of money, power, and resources on the local, global, and international levels. It's not that money makes the world go round, but I think Tupac said it best: money makes the world go round. And where you are in relation to the source of wealth really does influence your availability of resources, which also shows you your social determinants and your health disparities related to care. Okay, we're moving on to the next slide. Okay, we're talking some more about healthcare disparities and the differences among population. So it's important to know what health disparities your patients face. You know, what are some things that keep them from receiving care? What are some things that hinder them from being willing to accept care or seeking care? You know, it's not just because, you know, we live in Madison and the Jackson area, and there's tons. Oh, is she not adorable? I love her. Like, she is my child. She is the cutest thing ever. And she's just napping. Yeah, just taking a little nap while mommy teaches. She's so cute. I love her. Love her, love her, love her. Okay, so sorry, back to what I was talking about. Just because we live in Jackson and healthcare is easily accessible to us. Oh, here's a better picture. Say hi, Jules. Say hey. Say hey, Mama loves you. Yes, she does. Oh. Yeah, now she really wants to get in the middle. Come sit in my lap. Come sit in my lap. Okay, note to self. Jules cannot come and visit anymore with us. So we were talking about slide 4, where it talks about, there we go, healthcare disparities and addressing health and how we can address it. So as our culture continues to change and evolve, you know, 20 years ago, our biggest healthcare disparity was African Americans. Like, that was the biggest group 20, 30 years ago. Because of, even though segregation had ended, access to care was limited, specifically back in the 70s and even the early 80s, there was so much limited access for that one group because of where they lived and because of, you know, legislation, and nonprofits were just now getting on that bandwagon that that specific group of low-income African Americans had limited access. So that was 20 or 30 years ago. And now the biggest group that we look at as far as health disparities are going to be our LGTB, our lesbian, gay, transsexual, and bisexual patients are really right now our biggest group of those with health disparities because of their their sexual identification. It causes a whole new gamut of issues, because their issues and their health concerns are different than the traditional heterosexual population. Um, so that's the group that a lot of nonprofits and the government and a lot of health policy people are now focusing on. I think it's very interesting. In the PowerPoint that you uploaded, you can see the slides and the speaker notes. So the speaker notes are something you definitely want to look at as you're preparing to test and looking at your study guide that I'll be providing in the next week or so for our Unit 3 test. But it says, in addition to poor access to healthcare, a large body of research shows that healthcare systems and healthcare providers can contribute significantly to the problem of health disparities. Inadequate resources, poor patient provider communication, and a lack of culturally competent care, fragmented delivery of care, and inadequate access to language services all comprise patient outcomes. So let's talk about that for a second. In fifth and sixth block, I'm going to pick on Makira. And in seventh and eighth block, I'm going to pick on Hannah. How do you think healthcare providers and their lack of culturally competent care and lack of their lack of comfort with dealing with certain populations hinders the care that they provide? Okay, I'm sure you gave great answers. But really, what we want to talk about as we move forward is cultural competence and how us being comfortable with different populations affects the care that we give. Um, our prejudice and stereotypes and, you know, our realization that we actually really do racially profile at times all hinders the care that we give. Okay, guys, I'm really learning a lot about QuickTime and videoing today. It's very exciting. I'm sorry it's so broken up, but there's really not a pause button if you need to get up and go to the bathroom when you're recording. So I'm learning a lot today about media. So thanks for being my guinea pigs. So we just ended our conversation about cultural competence and how our own personal cultural competence affects the care that we provide to our patients. I talked about how um, we have our own individual stereotypes about cultures. And what I find so interesting is I worked at UMC. I worked with a variety of different people, white, black, purple polka dotted, orange, yellow. In my time there, I worked with new young people, millennials. I worked with Generation X, Generation Y, and we all have our own unique individual stereotypes. And it doesn't really matter about the color of your skin, because I stereotyped white people just the way that my African American nurse would stereotype other African Americans. When we label people as, oh, they're redneck, backwoods, country, ghetto fabulous, all of those things, when we have those stereotypes, it really does affect the care that we provide. The important part about culturally competent care is realizing that you have those stereotypes and making sure that you don't allow them to affect the care that you provide. Just because our patient is ghetto fabulous and, fits into that stereotype doesn't mean that they need to get less care. Just because a patient looks like us and talks like us and comes from our same cultural background doesn't mean that they need to get better care. We have to make sure that we treat everyone the same. And that goes for us too, specifically y'all, where you are. Y'all are sophomores and juniors. Y'all are the leaders of our high school, and the underclassmen look to y'all to know how to act and how to treat others. And I laugh because dealing with high school students is not a lot different than dealing with adults. Surprisingly, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. But the same issues that y'all deal with in high school are going to follow you all the way through your life. I mean, people gossip, people treat people unfairly, people are not kind sometimes. The only difference is by the time you get to be my age, you are comfortable enough having a conversation with someone and telling them in a very polite way that you don't appreciate things. But anyway, I forget where I was going with that tangent. Oh yeah, that's right. Y'all are leaders in our high school. Y'all, people perform to the expectations that they're given. And if it is an expectation that waving your Trump flag at a Germantown High School football game is appropriate, then people are going to perform to that expectation. If people perform to the expectation and they see others being mean or hateful to our super Mavs, others are going to emulate those behaviors. So you as a student really do lead the way in your own little Germantown high school culture. And it's important for us to be aware of what personal stereotypes that we have. And when we treat other people different based on our own beliefs and our own prejudices, so that we can stop, assess why we're doing that, and make changes in our behavior. So that's something that you learn over time. So I challenge each of y'all, even though you're not in the hospital setting, you're not providing care every day to patients, you are providing care at a certain level to your peers. So I challenge y'all to be aware of when you see yourself feeding into a stereotype or a prejudice that you have based on how you interact with your other peers. Okay, so we're talking about cultural competence right here. This slide, I believe it is slide number 5. And just how we, let's see, let me get my PowerPoint up to date to look at my speaker notes. Developing cultural competence allows systems and agencies and groups of professionals to function effectively, to understand the needs of groups of people and groups that we are providing care to, and thus it eliminates healthcare disparities and ultimately health disparities. When we are aware that we have prejudices and that we are not informed about a culture, and gaining that cultural competence really does make us be better healthcare providers. It helps us be better people. Anytime that you get the opportunity to travel internationally, specifically overseas to India or anywhere on the continent of Africa, in South America and Central America, I mean, even out west, even up north. I mean, any opportunities you have to travel, it really does open up your eyes and makes you more comfortable with different populations. I am very comfortable providing care to Muslim patients because I met and I spent time with Muslim people. Their Punjab and their robes don't scare me anymore like they used to, or make me uncomfortable like they used to. Meeting Muslim clerics and leaders in the Muslim congregation, and learning that they are people just like us, even though they look different, and that it's very easy to fall into those social stereotypes that we have about Muslims, specifically in America post 9/11, and now that we have all of the ISIS conversations and different, you know, homebound or homeborn terrorists here in America. You know, it's very easy for us to allow that media content and those media opinions to influence how we treat others. Not necessarily how we treat others, but how we feel towards others, and how we feel ultimately affects the care that we provide. And so it's important, I feel, for y'all to have the opportunity to travel abroad if at all possible, or even not even traveling abroad, going into downtown Jackson and working with homeless populations, or ministering to those who aren't able to have insurance, and seeing that it's not just low income people who don't have insurance. It's everybody. It's upper class. It's people that we work with. It's people that we live with. It's people that we play football with, um, that have health disparities. Those cultural opportunities are so important to your growth as a person. So it's really important to have those opportunities to volunteer with people who don't look and talk just like you. Okay, so I'm stepping off my soapbox. I'm so sorry about that. Moving on to cultural competency and how you become culturally competent. That travel, that volunteering is very important to maintaining cultural competent care. Knowing what your values are. Right now, where you are, it's very easy to adapt and adopt your parents' political views, religious views, social views. As you grow and go off to college, you realize that maybe your parents' views aren't necessarily really how you feel. And so that development of your own personal value set is an interesting part of growing up. You can conduct your own cultural assessment, just looking inside and realizing, do do I have prejudices? Do I have an assumed set of beliefs about certain populations? Knowing and being aware that you have those is half the battle. It's important to be open to your own self and your own set of beliefs, to really understand where it is that you can grow and areas that you need to learn about. Let's see. Um, I love this slide because it says adapt to diversity. It's easier said than done, but it's very important because that will be everything that you have to do in life. You can attempt to surround yourself with people that look like you and talk like you and have the same set of values. But the reality is, once you get out into the workforce, even in college, your freshman year of college, especially if you go to a big university, Ole Miss State, you are going to be around possibly a majority of people that look like you and act like you, but there are always going to be people who don't. So it's really important and interesting to be open to learning about those people that don't look like you and talk just like you, and go to the Baptist church with you, or have that same group of friends. Okay, so our next slide, it's going to be slide 6, is cultural competency. And these are just some ways that you can really look and understand what cultural competence is. It's important to respect a patient's health beliefs. It's important to have a shifting model of understanding of the patient experience, as in, it's not all about you. It's not. It's about our patient and the care that we're providing. So it's important to have a shifting model of understanding of the patient experience. You learn something new every day in healthcare. You learn something new about yourself, about your patients, about providing care, and just being open to that. The ability to elicit a patient's explanation of an illness and its causes. Just because we know what causes C. diff, diarrhea, doesn't mean that the patient understands or believes that. Some cultures believe that illness is retribution for sin, is a way for the universe to equalize itself. And there are different things that are different views of our own that we need to be open to and make sure that we're on the same page when we're talking to our patient. Ability to explain to a patient the healthcare provider's perspective of illness and its perceived causes. Again, you have to be able to verbalize what you know, what you see as truth as far as healthcare and the pathophysiology of an illness and the causes of an illness to patients who don't necessarily believe that exact way. Being able to negotiate a mutual, agreeable, safe, and effective treatment plan. Just because you feel that something needs to be done a certain way doesn't mean that your patient does. So you have to really be open to discussing things with them, and coming to a mutual understanding. Um, I just messed up my PowerPoint slides. Okay. For instance, I'm going to pull back from my teenage years, though it's been quite a few. I didn't really like it when my parents told me what to do. For instance, I was dating a guy, his name was Jason. My parents didn't like him at all, felt he was a bad influence. Um, and they said, "You're not going to date him." And I said, "Okay." No, I said, "Whatever." And so it's really funny. Jason and I dated off and on my last 2 years of high school and my first 2 years of college. And my parents weren't aware. Every so often, my mother would be sneaky. Back in the day when you had paper billing with your cell phone, you could see what numbers were dialed. And I got real sneaky about it. You can buy phone cards for super cheap. Um, anyway, it wasn't my idea and I didn't understand. And I said, well, whatever. And continued to date Jason on and off for 4 years. Ultimately, I realized that my parents were right. Can't get that time back. But not until it was that I understood why, and that it was my decision to not date Jason anymore, did I really do what my parents wanted me to do. You're thinking about that situation in your life right now that your parents are trying to make you do that you're like, oh no, don't think so. It's the same way with patience. If we have a patient that doesn't buy in to what we're telling them or doesn't believe what we're telling them or think it's a good idea, they're not going to do it. Our patients with diabetes, when we say, hey, you can't eat chitlins and mashed potatoes and greens at every meal, you need to do low carb, high protein, low fat. Until they buy in and understand why it's important, they're not going to do it. Same way with you and your parents, them trying to be good parents for you and make you productive citizens, and not waste your life away with a loser boy. I really probably need to call my mom and tell her she was right and thank her. Anyway, so that's the same way it is with our patients. We have to come to a mutual understanding when we're developing a plan of care for them, when we're trying to help them be better. It's the same way with y'all and your parents. So, being aware of cultural competence and that communication piece is very important. So, I want to tap my next on my video camera, but I can't because it's not going to do anything. So our next slide is going to be, slide 7 talks about cultures and what actually is culture. Culture is a set of values or beliefs, attitudes, language, symbols, rituals, behaviors, customs that are unique to a certain group of people. Within the white people, there are different cultures. Within the black people, there are different cultures. Within the Indian or brown people, there's different cultures. Even within the Hispanic population, there's different cultures. Even though they're one ethnic group, there's different cultures within each group. And it's important to be aware of that and be open to that. Culture is typically passed from one generation to the next. Believe it or not, you really are going to turn out just like your mother or your father, unless it's a bad influence. If they're good people, you will, typically. I am my mother's child. I act just like her. Well, I have my dad's personality, but my mom's looks and mannerisms. It's often defined, culture's often defined as a set of rules, and it's typically the foundation and behavior, foundation for behaviors for people. Again, what you hold true and true to yourself and value is what's going to motivate you to act. Okay. So the next slide. This is also very important. Culture is learned, it's shared, it's social in nature, and it's dynamic and constantly changing. I love looking at families who have adopted children from other countries, China, Vietnam, Russia. Those are a whole set of culture in and of themselves. But once they get here and they live with their family, that culture of that family is learned. Just because you're born in China doesn't mean you're going to have Chinese culture. Just because you're born in Nigeria doesn't mean you're going to have those same culture and beliefs. It's learned, and it really is a very environmental thing. And that's an important thing to remember when you're dealing with patients, specifically if they don't look like you and talk like you. Um, Culture is learned. We are products of our environment. And someone who is brought up in a culture that doesn't trust, um, we'll just say, doesn't trust white people, doesn't trust doctors or nurses, or doesn't trust the institution, the government as a whole, you're going to have to overcome those cultural beliefs in order to provide the best care. Okay, and it's real. There are people who think that all white people are out to get them, or that all black people are thugs and gang members, or that all Indian people own gas stations. It's not true. It's not true, and you have to be open to people having those stereotypes about yourself, about you as a provider and as a person, in order to overcome those. Okay, moving on along. Ethnicity. So let me pull this up. This is a slide that we're on. Ethnicity is a classification of people based on a national region, origin, and or culture. It shares common heritage, typically geographic region, social customs, and language beliefs. There are subgroups, like we said earlier, among the bigger group of culture. Okay. Some common ethnic groups include African American, Asian, European American, Hispanic American, Middle Eastern, Arabic American, and Native American. Um, I love the United States of America because it is such a huge melting pot for people. It's huge. Um, just because you are a certain way doesn't mean that your neighbor's going to be that way. It's a huge melting pot. And that's really why cultural competence in healthcare, and really as a person, is so very important. Okay. Um, so race is based on physical or biological factors. So you have ethnicity, which is based on where you live, and your culture. And then you have your race, which is based off of your physical or biological factors, color of your skin, facial features, blood type, bone structure. I think it's really interesting. I didn't even realize this because I always mark white Caucasian on every survey or every test that I take that asks for my race. But there isn't typically like a Arabic American checkbox. Look the next time that you take a test based and you have to fill out your ethnicity. So there's a group of people that for the 2020 census, that's going to be something that is going to be a choice. So that's really, really important to think about that too. I was watching that article and it talked about how, they weren't Asian and they weren't black and they weren't white. They weren't Hispanic. There wasn't a place for them to mark. So for some, that really does hinder their identity. So it's important to be aware of that. And race cuts across multiple ethnic and cultural groups. So specifically as you grow and you meet new people, you will notice that there are some super dark Indians and some super light people from Nigeria. It just depends. And that's why it's so important not to have those you can have prejudice. It's important not to have them, but it's important to not let them influence how you treat people, because you don't know just by looking at someone where they're from. Okay. Let's see. Now we're on to slide looks like 12. There's differences among people resulting from all these different components of race and culture and ethnicity. And that really influences someone's behavior. Okay. People adapt the values and the behaviors of those they surround themselves with. That's why your parents don't want you hanging out with people who do drugs and have sex inappropriately at a young age, because you typically adapt to the people that you surround yourself with. You also perform to the expectations that you're given. And so that's why culture and ethnicity and being aware of that is so important. Okay. Cultural assimilation. Cultural assimilation is the idea of having a group of people who come from a different country and how they adapt to the ways of a culture. For instance, Assyrian refugees that have come over from Syria, they are now in the process of cultural assimilation. They have come from their country, they've come into our country, and they will adapt and assimilate some of our American beliefs and customs into their culture. It's interesting when you have different subgroups of population. We can use Chinatown in New York or DC or San Francisco or Little Italy. Those are small, compact groups of a certain culture. And if you stay there long enough, you will find that there are certain people in that little subgroup, that little community, that haven't assimilated at all. But they still speak Chinese. They don't speak any English. They follow distinctly their Chinese culture or their Italian culture or their Hispanic culture that they haven't assimilated at all. That they are still in that, and it's a protective mechanism for people, especially when it's scary coming to a new place to live, and it's scary coming to a place where you don't understand the language. But for America, we provide a source of hope and opportunity that they don't have in their home country. So it's worth overcoming that fear to come to the United States. But once they get here, it's very easy, just like us, to hang out with people who look like us and talk like us and have the same values, the same for them. So even though different cultures come to America, you can find small pockets of people that they may be on American soil, but they still have their very distinct Chinese or Italian or Mexican or Arabic culture. It's really fun to watch, and as you travel, you'll get to experience some of that. Okay, so now we're moving on to bias, prejudice, and stereotyping. Um, these are things that we really have to be aware of as we provide care. Bias is a preference that inhibits true judgment or open communication. It's a preference that inhibits impartial judgment. Ethnocentricity, believing that my white way is the way to be, which is totally not. Age, we have biases against age. Y'all think I'm crazy because I'm older than you are. I think you're crazy because you're 14. Economics, that's easy to see, specifically in our society. Living on the wrong side of the tracks. Y'all may not have ever heard that. But living on the wrong side of the tracks. Oh, they're poor. White trash. Trailer trash. Physical size. Occupation. We put people that are doctors and lawyers on pedestals. And then we downplay those who are in maintenance or custodial work or work in the cafeteria. We do that based on occupation, certain biases. Sexual preference, we stereotype people all the time. And then also with gender, we have specific gender roles that we expect people to play in America. In our Southern culture, the men are going to go out there and hunt and fish and kill food and beat people up to protect us. And the women are going to stay at home and cook and clean and raise babies. But that's really not true. And people that sometimes don't fit into that expected gender role are looked upon as different. Guys who like photography and enjoy looking nice and don't like hunting or fishing and killing stuff are seen as metrosexual, or, oh, he's gay. And women who don't want a family, don't care to be married, love their careers, and want to flourish in their careers, are seen as awkward and weird, and wanting to be men. So cultural and gender stereotypes are real, and it's important for us to be aware of those. Okay, so we're moving on to prejudice, which is going to be slide 15. Prejudice is a strong feeling or belief about a person or subject without reviewing the facts or information, and it's often based on fear. Prejudices that we have towards people are typically based off of fear. We can use the prejudice that some of us have towards Muslim Americans. We see 9/11, we see ISIS, and the fear that we're going to be hurt or harmed can interfere with our openness to that group or population, and it shouldn't be that way. It's important for us to realize when we have those prejudices and work to overcome them. Stereotyping is making an assumption that everyone in a group is the same way. I giggle because I have stereotypes about y'all. I love it when I get to talk with some of my friends and they're like, oh, how's high school going? Because y'all know it's totally not what I'm used to doing. I'm used to managing people and taking care of people. I'm not used to teaching high school students. And I'm like, they're such millennials. And I giggle and I talk about y'all on your cell phones and your YouTube while I'm teaching, and your inability to pay attention for more than 5 seconds. And how to y'all it's so important that you have a job that you can drive 6 or 7 different cars, and how, oh, they just don't know how life is. We all have stereotypes. Y'all have stereotypes about teachers. Y'all think we're all out to get you and that none of us care and we want your lives to be miserable. Not really. Not really. I promise. I promise. So stereotyping is really interesting and it's easy to form, but it's very important for us to be aware of that. Okay. Moving on. Let's see. Oh, everything is dinging. I got a email message. Sorry. So bias, prejudice, and stereotypes create barriers to effective relationships. For healthcare providers, we need to avoid acting on those assumptions and feelings because all of our patients deserve the same level of care. And we need to be aware of what our own biases, prejudices, and stereotypes are so that we consider ways to avoid those. For me, specifically when I have an interaction with a family that's negative and I'm like, oh my God, they are such white trash. Or, oh my God, they're so high and white, which is what we in healthcare call patients who have private insurance that are so needy, that need like 17 juices, 14 bags of ice, and their kid's really not sick and they're freaking out. That's what we do. I pray. I have to pray. I have to ask the Lord to give me sensitivity to the needs of my patients so that I do not allow my stereotypes to affect the care that I provide. So it's important to know what your stereotypes and biases are so that when you feel yourself starting to play into those, that you know how to stop yourself. Okay, it's really important for life in general too. So understanding cultural diversity, cultural and ethnic, y'all, I can't talk. I've been talking for too long. It says 30 minutes. I'm sorry. Y'all feel free to pause at any time and like go to the bathroom or the vending machine. Okay, well, let's just do that. Let's stop right now. My throat's dry. I need to go refill my water bottle. And come back in 10 minutes. If that's okay with Mr. McCool, I'm sorry. If y'all have already just taken a bathroom break. If you just take a bathroom break, you can't go to the bathroom. But take a few minutes, get up and stretch, go to the vending machine, the bathroom, and we'll be right back. Okay, guys, hope y'all enjoyed your bathroom break. While y'all were going to the bathroom, I went to Lowe's, bought some flowers for my front yard. It looks very fall-like. Cooked dinner and cleaned the kitchen. Great way to use 10 minutes, huh? Okay, guys, so we're going to get back to this. We're about halfway through. I heard those sighs, even not being there. I heard them. But we're going to kind of pick up the pace a little bit and just kind of move forward. I think just my biggest thing I want y'all to get out of this time in this video and this lecture is that it's important to know what your biases are, what your prejudices are, what your preconceived notions about others. Recognize when you are doing those things so that you can stop yourself and recognize what you're doing so you can treat others the same. It's a great thing to learn now while you're in high school. You're not going to miss out on friendships with great people because you don't like them because they live in Canton. Who knows? Anyway, so we're going to be picking up on, it looks like slide 17. And so we are talking about understanding cultural diversity and really how someone's culture, even our culture and our ethnic beliefs affect our behavior. Again, culture is learned. We are products of our environment. And that's really the one thing I learned most of being a nurse is that specifically dealing with children. And I'm like, why is that 9-year-old cussing at me? Like, really? He's 9. Who has been letting him watch that trash on TV? What my values are and how I will raise my children are completely different than the way that other people raise their children. And he is the product of his environment. We learn from our environment. And many of you who have prejudices and biases have learned those from your parents. So anyway, so we're talking about culture and ethnic beliefs affect behavior. Again, it says healthcare workers need to be aware of these beliefs to meet physical, social, emotional, and the mental needs of the patient. And just being holistic in your care. It's really important when we look at a patient that we see the whole picture. Again, the same thing for dealing with your peers. Just because someone acts a certain way at school doesn't mean that that's who they are. There may be a reason why they're acting that way. When I look at students, if I look at students who are performing poorly, and I just feel that that's not a natural, it doesn't meet their personality. They don't have an attitude that they don't care, even though they're not doing well in my class. I have to dive a little bit deeper because there are things that affect the way that we live and work and function. And so it's important to look at the whole person. Another thing that's really interesting that I find that I've noticed just being at Germantown, a lot of my patients did not have nuclear families where it was the mom and the dad and the patient. They had a single mom with a dad not involved, or a stepdad or a stepmom. There really wasn't a typical nuclear family unit. Whereas with y'all, I've noticed that really the first thing that comes to my mind is do the last names match? Do the parents' last names match? Parent and child. And so I've noticed that there are a lot of nuclear families, which is interesting for me. I wasn't expecting that, I guess, because I'd come from such a different background. But just something that I learned I thought was interesting. So then you also have extended family. Sometimes extended family lives with families in a single home. I know that the Hispanic culture does a lot of that with the matriarch or patriarch of the family being the great great grandfather or great great grandmother, and then the rest of the family living in the home together. It's very common in certain cultures. Recognition and acceptance of family organization is essential in all aspects of the healthcare field. You need to know who is in charge, who's the decision maker, who has the legal right to make decisions. Just because the mom sitting at the bedside is the mom doesn't mean that she has the right to make decisions about the child's care or the patient's care or whatever. So it's important to know what you're dealing with and the family organization. Okay, so language can either be a hindrance or it can be something great that you can use with your patients. Um, Research does show that people with a language barrier, that English is not their first language or they don't speak English at all, are at have health disparities, like we learned about earlier. A group of people based on their social, economic, or geographical regions that have different outcomes than a normal set of patients. English is the dominant U.S. language, but there are many other languages spoken. Just all across the board. Spanish, English, Chinese. Everything is spoken in our world today. You need to make sure that you always determine the language needs of your family. Okay. Something very interesting is it's very easy to use a sibling or a brother or a sister that's at the bedside to translate for you, but it's very important that you utilize your interpretive services to make sure that the patient's getting the right information. Okay. Medical permission form must be usually printed in the patient's native language. That is 100% correct. University, we had a whole database of consent forms and informed consent forms and a language line that we could call and get people that had all kinds of different native tongues so that they can make sure that our patients had the right information to make good decisions. So it's very, 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 very important. Okay, guys, sorry, my computer's about to die, so I have to go plug it up. Anyway, so our next slide we're looking at is going to be, let's see, slide 20, where it's talking about personal space and touch. Okay, so we all know that different people are different about personal space and being touched. It's very important to understand, first of all, if it's a cultural thing. There are certain cultures that are that way, where men can't touch women, women can't touch men. And so it's really important to be aware of that, first of all, but also to read the body language of your families and your patients. Some do not like to be touched, which is totally fine. It's totally fine. I have a friend that I hug her on purpose to make her uncomfortable. So you just have to learn the group of people that you're taking care of. So our next slide talks about eye contact. Again, it just depends on the patient. It depends on the person. But there are certain cultures that women don't make eye contact with men. Men don't make eye contact with women, which is weird for me because I'm always like looking in the eye. I've got to look them in the eye and know that they're hearing me. But in some cultures, that's not okay. So it's important to be aware of that. Okay, gestures. As you can tell, I'm very animated. Again, certain cultures are not that way. It's important to know which ones are and which ones aren't. And you just have to be aware of it. And usually you learn because you do something wrong. So if you have a patient that is of a different culture, one that you're not familiar with, or a different background or heritage, it's important to kind of get a rundown of what's going on and what are some basic beliefs that they have. Okay, healthcare belief systems, y'all. This again depends solely on the patient. I wish that there was a chart that you could flip to that would tell you exactly what each culture believes or what each person believes, but there's not. There's not. Western medicine, which is an example of our American healthcare system, some cultures are not fans of. They're more holistic and like more alternative therapies first, as in comparison to ours, where we're give them a pill, cut them open, get it fixed. So you're just really going to have to know your patients and be aware if that's the way that they feel. There are also people who are very what I call granola. Again, that's a stereotype. Granola that are very organic. They want organic food. They want no preservatives, possibly no vaccines for their children. Those are things that you need to assess and know when you're dealing with certain patients and families. Okay. It says, there's a great chart in your book, which you'll be using for your cultural presentation. There should be some information in Canvas. I need to double check to make sure I put it in there about which culture you're going to be learning about. Sorry. Okay. And then there's always that alternative healthcare. Alternative healthcare methods, again, Nutritional, my sister-in-law is gluten-free. Like, she doesn't eat any gluten. It's all natural, all organic, no gluten, because of an autoimmune disease that she has. That gluten and those other factors in processed food put her inflammatory system in overdrive, which causes her to have problems with her autoimmune disease. So it's important to know if there's any nutritional requirements, um, you know, spiritual methods or anything like that. We have, even though Southern Baptist to the core, born and raised, there may be people who aren't, who want a spiritual healer. American Indians, especially the Choctaw culture, has spiritual healers that they utilize at times. So if you have a patient, for instance, that's dying, it's important to incorporate that into their care and into their plan, because that's what they want, that's what they believe. So it's important to be aware of that. Just because it's not something you would want doesn't mean that you don't need to address that with your patients. I just pushed down on this computer, just kidding. Okay, here we go. Talking again about spirituality and religion, slide 25. Again, it's totally based off of the patient. We have to talk to them, find out if there are any cultural or dietary requests that they have. Is there any religious or spiritual belief that would hinder health care that we would provide? The first one that pops off the top of my head is people who are Jehovah's Witness do not receive blood products. So that's really important, specifically when you're providing care to a patient that's going to have surgery or has leukemia. And so that's a huge, huge, huge thing that you have to think about and have to assess when you're providing care to a patient. Okay. So we're talking again more about spirituality and religion. You just have to talk to your patients. Religions can be monotheistic, polytheistic, atheist, agnostic. They can believe in multiple gods, which would be polytheist, monotheist, one. Atheists believe in no God, and agnostics believe in a higher power. It's important to know what your patient's spiritual beliefs are. That's part of the holistic health care that we desire to provide. We have to accompany and assess their spirituality. Okay, respecting cultural diversity. The biggest thing that we must do in order to respect cultural diversity is to know what our values and beliefs are. It's important to know what we believe, why we believe what we believe, and understand who we are. Okay, and when we understand who we are and we see what beliefs we have, it's easier to be open to other cultures because you don't feel quite as threatened by them or them thinking that you're stupid or dumb or whatever. And so that's really the biggest thing. I encourage each of y'all to take some time to self-reflect. What do I believe? Why do I believe it? Do I have prejudices? Do I have biases? Do I stereotype a certain group of people? And just to know where you stand is the biggest thing about cultural diversity and respecting cultural diversity. Because once you understand who you are, it's a lot easier to be open to others. Everyone adopts beliefs and forms a pattern of behavior based on culture, ethnicity, race, life experiences, spirituality, and religion. And healthcare workers must learn to respect those differences. Patients can refuse you as a healthcare provider, but you can't refuse patients. That's just not part of our ethical code of conduct as healthcare providers. We have to provide care to everyone. So skills and interventions, cultural assessment. There are lots of different cultural assessments available online. You can Google them. You need open-ended, focused questions. Sometimes yes/no questions are appropriate, but open-ended questions are usually the ones that are the best for finding out what patients believe. You have to form trust with your patients. I have worked really hard to form trust with y'all by telling y'all I'm really not sure how this whole little teaching gig works, but we're going to get through it together. We're going to learn together, and we're going to grow together. And that's the same way with our patients. If you're honest with them, I don't understand a lot. I don't know a lot about your culture. Please help me understand. How can I provide the best care to you? and they'll tell you. They'll tell you. Okay, here's some mnemonics to use. I thought were really, really, really cool. Um, I'm sorry, y'all. You know, it's 8 o'clock. It's almost past Mema's bedtime. Got about 30 minutes left. Um, Certain mnemonics, learn, respect, ethnic, Clara, are always to really help us process through talking to our patients. Listen, explain, acknowledge, recommend, negotiate. You know what you need from the patients know what they want, and come up with a good, solid negotiation. Somewhere in the middle always tends to work better. Respect, start a rapport, have empathy for your patient, support them, form a partnership, explain, know about their culture, and build trust. Ethnic is explanation, treatment, healers, negotiate interventions, collaboration, and Clara, claim, listen, affirm, respond, add. Again, when you're dealing with a patient or a person that you don't know much about their culture, that you have biases and stereotypes towards, building that trust is the most important thing for you to do. And the best way to do that is letting them know what you don't know. Okay, so that you can start that communication and that discussion to make sure that you expand your knowledge base about different cultures and different beliefs. Okay, so here's just a cute little picture. It just talks about clinicians assessing, making sure that the patient's got recall and comprehension, and it's a whole circle where the clinician explains a new concept, the clinician assesses whether or not the patient understands, the clinician clarifies and tailors the explanation to the patient's needs. The clinician assesses patient recall and comprehension, and the patient recalls and comprehends. It's so very, 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 very important when we're providing care and specifically patient education to our families that they understand what we're saying. If we send a sweet little Hispanic family home with English instructions on how to manage their diabetes, do you think that they're really technically going to understand everything that they're supposed to do? No, they're not, because English is not their first language. Spanish is. Um, Having a dietitian that comes in and talks about McDonald's and Subway and how to look at carbs and how to meal plan based on a typical Southern diet is not going to have a lot of success with that Hispanic family, because they have a Hispanic type of diet. They eat a lot of corn. A lot of their stuff is cooked different. Corn is the base of most of their food, whereas flour is ours. So it's really important to make sure that you pick what's right for your families. Okay, think ahead, think outside that box. Okay, to what's going to be best, and you want them to teach back to you, just like I get y'all to do. I ask y'all questions. I elicit responses from y'all to make sure you're comprehending what I'm telling you. I test y'all to make sure that y'all are taking in the information that I'm teaching you, which we won't talk about our last test. Anyway, so moving on along to almost to the end. We've got 2 slides left. Y'all have been so great. This has been a long lecture, and I apologize, but I think it's so very important for us to talk about. I love this idea that the motivation of a healthcare professional is to want to, not to have to, engage in the process of becoming culturally competent. As a healthcare provider, you take an oath to do no harm, and part of that do no harm is diving deep into what you don't know, whether or not it's medicine, nursing, psychology, physical therapy, occupational therapy. We have to dive in to our patients' cultures in order to understand what's going to work best for them. Their quality of life depends on us having a great understanding of their culture and how to utilize that culture and that support system to better their health. Okay, and then the last thing I think is very interesting. I knew what core measures were, but I didn't understand why we did them. I just thought it was to provide better care. But core measures y'all will learn about in 8 years when y'all finally get out into the workforce. Our core measures in healthcare are key indicators that people have noticed for healthcare disparities. In pediatric, it's asthma and flu and pneumonia. And for asthma, we had certain things that we had to hit in order to make sure the patients had everything that they needed. The same thing for the flu. Flu is a core measure. Everyone, if you were in the hospital, you had to be offered the flu vaccination because it's so very important. Just like you, I'm going to tell you, go get your flu shot. It's covered by your health insurance. Medicaid covers the flu shot. All private insurances cover the flu shot. It's free. It's free. It's free. And so very, very important. Um, let's see what else it says down here. Oh, I love this. Um, it says, when policies impede the delivery of effective care, you and your colleagues must advocate for policy change. The world is ever changing. The United States of America is a vast and complex grouping of cultures and heritage, backgrounds, family dynamics. We must do everything within our power to provide the highest level of care for our patient. And if you notice that there is something that hinders you from providing that care, you must. We can apply that to our environment here at Germantown. If you notice that there's a practice or a something that we do that impedes cultural diversity and cultural sensitivity, we've got to do something to make it different. That's our goal as healthcare providers, as those who want to be in healthcare. We have to start now learning to advocate for each other, our peers, our families, our patients, in order to become the best at what we can do. So even though this lecture has been super long, and some of y'all may have even fallen asleep, it is so important when we think about cultural diversity and how to be the best healthcare providers, the best people we can be, to be open to other cultures and know ourselves. So I encourage y'all to do that. So I hope y'all had a great afternoon with me. Again, the PowerPoint is in Canvas if you don't already have it pulled up. All the information about your culture presentations that you should be ready to prepare and present on Friday will be in Canvas right now. When you're watching this, it'll be there. I'm to make sure it's in there, to make sure y'all have everything that you need. But anyway, if you have any questions about what you need to present on Friday, feel free to email me, amclain@madison-schools.com. And Mr. McCool, I hope they have been super awesome for you and so kind and quiet. Love y'all, and I'll see y'all soon.